Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Demolition Committee meeting of the City of Westmount for Thursday, October 7th, 2021. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Item number 2, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Peart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the agenda of the Demolition Committee sitting of October 7th, 2021 be adopted.
Thank you very much. And I have a seconder on this motion, Councillor Bostock. Item number 3, procedure for a demolition committee sitting. I'd like to explain that the purpose of this meeting is to render a decision on the demolition application. Oh, sorry, all in favor of the adoption of the agenda? Carried. The purpose of this meeting is to render a decision on the demolition application for the immovable located at 4898 de Maisonneuve Boulevard West, in accordance with the Act respecting land use and planning and development, as well as bylaw 1317 concerning demolition. I would also like to explain that Ms. Yuki Kropas of the Urban Planning Department and Urban Planning Advisor in the department will present the demolition project. The applicant will then be invited to make a presentation to the committee members. Any interested persons who sent either their comments or oppositions to the city clerk's office within the prescribed time period have been invited to make representations to the committee using the online form made available within the prescribed hours. The chair also may decide to hear any other person who wishes to make representations to the committee. Once the committee has heard all of those who would like to make a statement, it will have the opportunity to withdraw from this. So this link you can stay on, but council will leave it. The chair, and once the committee has heard all those who would like to make a statement, will have the opportunity to withdraw to deliberate on the project. And finally, the committee will render a decision or adjourn the meeting to render a decision at a later date. A second question period will be available to the public via Zoom webinar. All questions must relate to the demolition application. So now it is item number 4, the review of the demolition application. So I would hand it over to Ms. Kropas to take us through the next steps. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Je vais vous présenter la présentation pour la demande de démolition au 4898 de Maisonneuve. I will present the presentation for the demolition application of 4898 de Maisonneuve West. So we'll begin by on va commencer d'abord par un sommaire de l'ordre du jour. Donc, comme vous avez constaté, la mairesse, Madame Smith, a ouvert la séance, suivie par l'adoption de l'ordre du jour. Je vais décrire la procédure de démolition ainsi que l'étude de la demande. Ensuite, suivi par l'étude de la demande, il y aura la première période de questions, suivi par les oppositions et les commentaires, suivi par la décision du comité, la deuxième période de questions et finalement, à la toute fin, la fermeture de la séance. As you see on the screen, we have the agenda posted. We will begin, as you saw or heard, Ms. Mayor Smith opened the meeting, followed by the adoption of the agenda. I will present the demolition process as well as the application review. Following the project presentation, there will be the first question period, followed by the objections and comments, the committee's decision, the second question period, and finally the closing of the meeting. Alors, nous débuterons par les procédures. Je vais commencer par citer l'extrait sur la loi de l'aménagement et l'urbanisme, concernant les procédures d'opposition. Toute personne qui veut s'opposer à la démolition doit, dans les 10 jours de la publication de l'avis public ou, à défaut, dans les 10 jours qui suivent l'affichage de l'avis sur l'immeuble concerné, faire connaître par écrit son opposition motivée au greffier ou au secrétaire trésorier de la municipalité selon le cas. Avant de rendre sa décision, le comité doit considérer les oppositions reçues. Ces séances sont publiques. Il peut, en outre, tenir une audition publique s'il l'estime opportun. I'll begin by citing an extract from the Act respecting land use planning and development concerning the opposition process. A person wishing to oppose the demolition must do so by writing to the clerk or secretary treasurer of the municipality, giving the reasons for objecting within 10 days of publication of the public notice, or failing such notice within 10 days following the posting of the notice on the immovable concerned. Before rendering its decision, the committee must consider the objections received. Its sittings are public. The committee may also hold a public hearing if it considers it advisable. Alors, je vais continuer par décrire le cheminement de demande de démolition. Une demande de démolition commence par le dépôt de la demande de démolition, suivi par l'analyse préliminaire de la demande, suivi par la publication de l'avis public, ainsi que la soumission du dossier au service de l'aménagement urbain et au comité consultatif d'urbanisme pour recommandation, suivi par l'étude de la demande par le comité de démolition lors d'une séance publique, et finalement par l'affichage de la décision du comité de démolition avant l'émission du permis. I will continue by describing the process of the demolition application. The demolition application begins by the filing of the demolition application, followed by the preliminary analysis of the application, the publication of the public notice, followed by the submission of the file to the Urban Planning Department and the Planning Advisory Committee for recommendation, followed by the assessment of the application by the Demolition Committee at a public sitting, which is this evening, followed by the publication of the Demolition Committee's decision prior to the issuance of the permit. Nous procédons maintenant aux critères d'évaluation. Aucune demande de démolition n'est approuvée par le comité à moins que les conditions suivantes ne soient remplies. Toutes les procédures établies par le présent règlement et qui régissent la demande et le programme préliminaire ont été observées. Le comité est convaincu de l'opportunité de la démolition compte tenu de l'intérêt public et de l'intérêt des parties et plus particulièrement de l'état de l'immeuble ou des immeubles visés dans la demande, de la détérioration de l'apparence architecturale ou du caractère esthétique du voisinage, du coût de restauration, de l'utilisation projetée du sol dégagé. Autres critères incluent les caractéristiques architecturales du bâtiment, la localisation du bâtiment, le fait que le bâtiment fait partie d'un ensemble à l'échelle de l'îlot du quartier. S'il s'agit d'un bâtiment résidentiel, le préjudice causé aux locataires, les besoins en logement dans les environs et la possibilité de relogement des locataires. S'il s'agit d'un bâtiment autre que résidentiel, le potentiel d'offre d'emploi, l'équilibre des occupations, le maintien des services. La nécessité des travaux correctifs pour des fins sanitaires, sécuritaires ou environnementales, le cas échéant des oppositions reçues. I will continue by outlining the evaluation criteria. The committee shall not approve the application for the proposed demolition unless and until all the procedures established by the bylaw governing the application and the preliminary program have been observed. The committee is convinced the proposed demolition is advisable, taking into account the public interests and the interests of the parties, and in particular, the condition of the building or buildings contemplated by the application, the deterioration of the architectural appearance or aesthetic character of the neighborhood, the cost of restoration, the intended use of the vacated land. Other criteria include the architectural features of the building, the location of the building, the fact that the building is part of a whole at the scale of the block, the neighborhood. If a residential building, the harm to tenants, the housing needs in the area and the possibility of relocating tenants. If it is a non-residential building, the potential for employment opportunities, the balance of occupancies, the maintenance of services. And finally, the need for remedial work for health, safety, or environmental purposes. If applicable, also the objections received. Donc, la demande de démolition est située au 4898 boulevard de Maisonneuve-Ouest. The application for the demolition application is situated at 4898 boulevard de Maisonneuve-Ouest. C'est un bâtiment de catégorie 2. Il s'agit, the building in question is a building of a category 2. We see on the screen here an aerial view of the building at the corner of the Maisonneuve and Prince Albert. On voit à l'écran une vue aérienne du bâtiment aux angles de Maisonneuve et Prince Albert. Et on voit maintenant à l'écran le certificat de localisation avec le bâtiment, l'empreinte au sol du bâtiment existant. We see on the screen the certificate of location of the existing building. Vous voyez maintenant des vues de contexte. Donc, à gauche, la vue du bâtiment vers l'ouest, à droite, la vue du bâtiment vers le sud et en bas vers le nord. We see the building, contextual photos of the building from on the left looking west and on the right of the building looking south and looking north. Donc, on continue la présentation. La démolition a été complétée. On voit à l'écran le bâtiment actuel. La structure est à conserver. En vertu du plan d'implantation et d'intégration architecturale, PIA, qui a été approuvé, moins de 50% des murs extérieurs et de la toiture du bâtiment devraient être démolis. Toutefois, au moment des travaux, il a été constaté que l'enveloppe du bâtiment était endommagée et plus de 50% de celle-ci a été démolie. We see here the current condition of the existing building. The demolition has been completed, and what we're seeing here is the structure to be preserved. Under the approved Site Planning and Architectural Integration Program, SPAPE, less than 50% of the exterior walls and roof of the building were to be demolished. However, at the time of the work, it was found that the building envelope was damaged, and consequently, more than 50% of it was demolished, which triggers a demolition application. On va continuer par la présentation du programme préliminaire. We will continue with the presentation of the replacement program. So we see on the screen a 3D rendering of the replacement program, which was approved by Council at the meeting of August 5th, 2019. On voit ici à l'écran le projet approuvé par le Conseil à la séance du 5 août 2019. Une autre vue 3D, on voit on voit à l'écran à droite, souligné par sous la flèche bleue, le bâtiment en question. We see on the screen the approved project, to the right beneath the blue arrow, the project that was approved by Council. On voit le plan d'implantation. Here we see the site plan and the elevations. On the top, we see the front, we see the front and rear elevations on the screen. On voit à l'écran les élévations avant et arrière. Il faut prendre en note que la hauteur, elle est inchangée. Please note that the height has been unaltered. On voit maintenant les élévations ouest et est. La hauteur est toujours inchangée, évidemment. Et here we see on the screen the west and east elevations where the heights again are not altered. On va procéder par la recommandation du CCU. We will proceed with the recommendation of the PAC. L'analyse du CCU a été évaluée comme si la demande de démolition avait été déposée en 2019 avant la démolition accomplie en 2021. The PAC analysis was evaluated as if the demolition application had been filed in 2019 prior to the demolition being completed in 2021. Considérant que la demande répond faiblement aux critères, Considérant la catégorie 2 qui démontre le caractère architectural unique du bâtiment témoignant de son évolution, incluant l'ajout moderniste, considérant la perte des éléments caractéristiques du bâtiment lors de sa démolition, considérant le bon état du bâtiment en 2019, considérant que le règlement numéro 1305 sur les PIA favorise la conservation plutôt que la démolition d'un bâtiment. Le CCE recommande au comité de démolition de refuser la demande de démolition. Whereas the request weakly meets the criteria, whereas the category 2 demonstrates the unique architectural character of the building and its evolution, including the modernist addition, whereas the loss of characteristic elements of the building during its demolition, whereas the building was in good condition in 2019, whereas the SPAPE bylaw number 1305 favors the conservation rather than the demolition of a building. The PAC recommends that the Demolition Committee refuse the demolition request. Merci and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kropas, for the presentation. And now we will move to the applicant, I believe, is doing a presentation at this point. Is that correct? Is that still the case?
Yes.
So I'm assuming somebody is making them a... Et
Merci.
voilà, on est là. OK, parfait. I see there is a hand up of Mr. Noam Schnitzer, and I'm just wondering if that's to indicate that they are doing a presentation. Indeed. Okay, and then I assume communications is going to turn their cameras on so we can see them while they present.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman. Can
Yes.
you hear me?
I can hear you, but I cannot see you. And I'm there. I can see. Je peux voir Monsieur Tremblay maintenant.
This is Mr. Ravinsky speaking.
Hello.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm one of the counsel who represents the applicant. I am wondering whether there is a procès verbal that's being taken at this meeting.
Yes, and it's being recorded, and yes, it will be.
It will be distributed to us.
Yes, but there will be a recording as well.
Very well.
Okay. So I hand it over to you. I'm not sure if it's you, Mr. Ravinsky, who's doing the presentation, or if it's Mr. Tremblay as the architect, I believe.
No, he's an engineer and he's a principal, and Mr. Schnitzer will make the presentation.
Okay, so I do not see him as a panelist yet, but communications, I believe, will take care of that. Et voila, I see him there now.
Hi, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Schnitzer. So I'm going to hand it over to you for you to make a presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mayor Smith. I shall share my documents. So, merci beaucoup, Madame Kropas, pour votre résumé du projet et de la situation. En fait, notre présentation est une sommaire de la situation qui nous a emmené à ce point, en fait. Donc, je vais la summariser un tout petit peu plus pour notre présentation aujourd'hui. The project was approved in August of 2019, as mentioned. The construction permit was made available to us in February of 2020. Again, this being according to the plans that were submitted following the recommendations made by the CCU. Donc, comme mentionné ici, toutes nos planifications a été soumis selon les recommandations et les critères pour le projet. En raison de notre pandémie qui persiste toujours, on n'était pas capable de commencer la construction avant avril 2021. tous les détails délivrés au corps du métier en vue des travaux applicables ont été livrés selon les plans approuvés et conformément au zonage. Everything that was submitted, of course, reflected the approval process and the criteria applied. Following the authorization to begin the works, we had required that our engineer take another view of the walls in question, both the roof panels and the terracotta walls, to make sure that what was not visible during the previous assessments would be known prior to the deconstruction. It wasn't demolition, it was deconstruction that had been mandated to remove the exterior brick. What had been determined during this, during this investigation was that the terracotta block situated behind the exterior masonry was in an extremely poor state and could not support itself nor the future brick to be applied without severe risk both to the public and to the building. This was all admitted in a report issued by the engineer and submitted to Westmount. Therefore, at the time of the demolition, a directive was issued by the engineer to immediately remove the terracotta and the roof panels for public safety and for the safety of the building and the occupants to become the party inhabiting the premises. It's a future project. It should also be mentioned that according to the scenario, this happened very quickly due to the issues presented by the terracotta and the imminent risk that they posed to the pedestrians crossing along Prince Albert and elsewhere in proximity to the project. That having been said, il faudrait mentionner aussi qu'aucun aspect du projet n'a changé. Le projet reflète entièrement et exactement le projet qui était approuvé pendant le processus décrit et summarisé à date. Aucun élément architectural extérieur ni du design du projet n'a changé. The project has been entirely sold to a very large number of existing Westmount residents. And the project, as committed to and as promised during the approval in August of 2019, will be providing parking access to the residents along York Street, specifically 49, 4143, and 3533. For the advancement of the project and their access to parking is interlinked. At this point, je peux vous partager exactement les mêmes rendus que vous avez déjà vus dans la présentation de Madame Kropas. La façade du bâtiment sur de Maisonneuve, on parle du bâtiment existant transformé. Celui-là de Maisonneuve, coin Prince Albert. Celui-là de la ruelle future qui donne accès aux résidents mentionnés sur York, spécifiquement 33, 41, 43 et 49 York, ainsi que l'entrée au garage couvert par le jardin entre les deux bâtiments. This concludes the summary presentation that has been made a part of the discussion today.
Thank you, Mr. Schnitzer. So you don't have anything else that you want to add to that at this point?
Well, at this point, it depends ultimately on the questions that will be asked. We do have supportive documentation that's referenced in the presentation, but I'll leave it to you and the committee to let us know what questions you might have.
So at this point, we would read into the record any submissions that have been made to the city concerning this. We only had one submission. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Kropas, but I believe there was only one submission on this, and we have one written question, which we will address in the question period. But would you like me to read this, or would you like to read it, Ms. Kropas, the one submission? I can read it if you prefer.
The submission, you mean the comment that was submitted during the public notice period?
Yeah. Do we need to read that into the record?
You can summarize it, or if you wish, I can read it as well.
Maybe you could read it since, and given
Sure.
the time, but there is only one that had been submitted. So you can read it then.
Sure. Okay, so this is the one comment that was submitted during the 10-day public notice period. I will go to the original comment actually so that I have the full response. One moment. The replacement plan appears to respect the integrity and character of the neighborhood based on the detailed plans provided in accordance with the city's past practice, except 325, 327 Melville, where this past practice was inexplicably not followed. I assume the Board of Inspections and Planning Advisory Committee has also taken into account the impact of the new buildings on neighboring properties and quality of life for adjoining and neighborhood residents. What evidence does the city or the committee have before it that the building envelope was damaged? Is there an independent expert's report, independent from the applicant, available? Was the urban planning department advised of the alleged damage prior to full demolition of the building envelope? Is alternatively the city accepting the developer's word on this without independent verification?
Thank you. So that's the only comment that had been submitted. Should I address those questions at this point? I suppose we can. One of the questions that was asked was, what evidence does the city or the committee have before it that the building envelope was damaged? And the answer to that would be the city received the structural engineering report dated June 15th. On July 12th, 2021, identifying the poor state of the terracotta and of the roof concrete panels. The next question in the statement is there an independent expert's report, independent from the applicants, available? The report received by the city is signed by an engineer registered with the L'Ordre des Ingénieurs du Québec, which provided photographic evidence supporting the professional opinion. The city did not mandate an independent report. The third question of this is, was the urban planning department advised of the alleged damage prior to full demolition of the building envelope? No, is the answer. And the final question as part of this is alternatively the city accepting the developer's word on this without independent verification? The structural report and the photographs speak for themselves. So that is to address the one statement that was put in. And are there any others who are in the audience today? I would offer this at this point, if there is anyone who would like to make a statement. I'm seeing one question, but I'm not sure if this is meant for the question and answer period. Hang on.
Yeah, so I can read that question. The question is coming in from Ms. Samantha Hayes. Not sure if this went through. Following the increased scope of envelope demolition, has there been any application, or do you foresee any application relating to proposed changes to the project that would alter the footprint, density, use, or architectural design relative to the project approved in 2019?
I believe that they addressed this, but I'll hand this over to Councillor Pert, but it is the same project, but I will let Councillor Pert answer that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Indeed, the end product is the same. So scope, density, footprint, usage, none of that has changed from the 2019 project to the project that's being envisaged as part of this, as post to this 2021 demolition hearing.
Okay, thank you for that response. And then if there are no other, I'm not seeing any hands raised or anyone asking to make a statement at this point. There was just the one question from Ms. Hayes, but we did have one written question that was submitted. Would you like me to read that, Ms. Kropas, or would you prefer to read that?
I can read it.
Okay.
PAC reviewed the file as if the demolition application had been filed in 2019. Two reasons it recommends refusal concerns the loss of unique architectural character, including the modernist addition and the loss of character defining elements. Yet the loss of both of these was clearly evident in the rendering available on August 15, 2019, when Council approved the plan as, according to Council, it met the criteria of our bylaws. The rendering was reproduced in the August 13th Independent. The approval of this plan by Council, I assume, was based on the PAC's recommendation at the time. Please explain the contradiction. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And it's certainly something that will be also addressed as we deliberate this. I don't know if Councillor Peart, you want to address this at this point or afterwards?
I can touch upon it now. I think it's just important to point out that the PAC recommendation now is with respect to the demolition that's being proposed. The endpoint is still the same, that being the replacement project will look in the future as it was envisaged to when it was first presented to us in 2019. But what's a little bit different, so there might be a bit of a disconnect, is that the PAC is talking about the demolition and not about and is considering the replacement project, but its scope right now in the evaluation and its unfavorable recommendation is because of the demolition. I don't know if it clears it up. I know I can understand why there might be an appearance of inconsistency, but it's because of the two stages of the review that the PAC is doing.
Yeah, and this is obviously not an ideal situation, nor how we would want to be dealing with this type of demolition. So thank you for responding to that. I don't see any other questions. Oh, I do see a comment or which I can read out for everybody from Marie-Laure Guillard. I live in the neighborhood and I believe we shall all be happy to see this construction going on. For the last many years, this project is ugly on the street. The new project will be a good addition to the area. Westmounters need apartments and townhouses. So I guess it's more of a comment, but thank you for your comment. And indeed, we are trying to deal with this. This is the last day we could have this meeting in this mandate. So we do understand that the neighborhood would like to see this move forward. I think that's it for questions. I'm not seeing anything else in there. So now we will deliberate. So I guess I would ask council at this point to turn off make sure you're on mute and turn off your cameras, and we will be back hopefully in not too long. Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. We'll just wait for everybody to come back. Thank you. I think we are all back here. And I would just like, I'm going to hand it over to Councillor Breschke, who is the Commissioner for Sustainability and Accessibility, but also the councillor for the district that 4898 de Maisonneuve is located in. And she would like to ask a question of, and I'll leave it up to the developers as to who wants to answer it. And I know I'll hand it over to Marina, and then I guess whoever from their team would like to answer it, just raise your hand and our communications team will make you a panelist.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question, I'll start with a bit of a comment. So I'm the councillor for District 5. I'm well aware of the residents living in the area of your construction. And I'm a little bit concerned, I have to be very honest with you, but with a demolition that took place without a permit, we are conducting this demolition committee. It almost feels like it's an after the fact. It makes me feel a little uncertain about your accountability and your concern over safety and security and compliance, to be honest. So this area, there is the cycling path on de Maisonneuve, right by the property. There is the Chateau Westmount, a home, a CHSLD, private CHSLD, and with a lot of pedestrians walking and being pushed on wheelchairs and also on walkers, so vulnerable residents. And we have a pretty dense residential population, obviously the residents across the street, in behind, on York. So there will be many inconveniences with the project going forward. Now, I understand these questions should pertain to the demolition per se, but my question to you is, perhaps state what happened during the demolition. Could you explain why that happened, that the demolition continued without a permit? And what will you do going forward to clean your act, to make sure that going forward you will respect your neighbors and you will ensure the least disruption in traffic, pedestrians, vulnerable pedestrians first and foremost, and cyclists and vehicular traffic, and also all the environmental pollutants that result in construction. So I'm a bit concerned just because of what's happened in the process, and I would just like to hear from you on that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Breschke, for raising those concerns and those important issues. So I think Mr. Ravinsky has his hand up and he would like to respond perhaps, or maybe it's Mr. Schnitzer. Mr. Schnitzer, are you going to respond to that?
Sure, I can begin with the response. There was several questions I think asked in the comments made. I appreciate that there's a lot to unpack here and a lot to discuss. First and foremost, it was not our intention to proceed with a demolition without a demolition permit. It's very important that I be clear in stating that it was under the strict mandate of our engineer, and specifically due to the safety concerns of the public that you referenced, that the work was done beyond the percentages outlined in the criteria previously mentioned. But what I can also say is that the crew that had been given the mandate to conduct the deconstruction according to the criteria did so without a single complaint being registered by any of the neighbors, by any of the residents, or by anyone else that had brought any comment whatsoever negative to our attention. This was done under strict surveillance for safety and security, hence why the actions were taken that we're here discussing, and with a very, very specific concern towards the disturbance that any project would create. Now, I'm a little bit not surprised. I'm sort of a little bit contemplative of why you would say clean up our act. And I think that could be somewhat of a maybe biased position. I can tell you we are extremely upstanding individuals. We're all members of communities ourselves where, you know, peaceful enjoyment is of the utmost concern. I am a father. I have 3 children. You know, safety is prime on my mind and on everybody's mind. And this project would be conducted according to exactly that regardless. So that said, as far as the work proceeding, the fact that the bike path exists on de Maisonneuve is well known and well understood. The fact that public safety, regardless of any other consideration, is prime for any project of any kind. And these things are very much a part of how we conduct our work and how our subtrades conduct our work and how anybody involved with us would conduct the work moving forward. Cleaning of the site, removing of debris, the insurance that there are no idling trucks, that security is being observed from every angle possible, that where necessary notices are given to the neighbors. I personally myself went door to door and met with the people on York and advised those most impacted by the project that work was going to begin, and made sure that they had in hand all of the contacts for the project, including the on-site managers, the superintendents, myself, and other members of our group. So
Okay.
I hope that helps to clarify the question.
Thank you for your response. Does anyone else from council have any questions, any comments at this point?
I just would like to acknowledge the response. Thank you, Mr. Schnitzer. I can retract the words Clean Up Act. Perhaps it was more communication clarification needed. Thank you.
I understand.
Thank you. So now we will move to item number 8 with the Décision du Conseil. And I'll hand it over to Councillor Peart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is going to be a long one, so I will read all of the whereas statements. Whereas on July 5th of 2021, a demolition permit application was submitted to the City of Westmount for the partial demolition of a vacant 3-story office building, Category 2, located at 4898 de Maisonneuve Boulevard West, in order to retain its structure to incorporate a 3-story residential building. Whereas on September 10th, 2021, a public notice was published as required by bylaw and the City of Westmount's bylaw. Whereas on September 10th, 2021, a copy of said notice was posted on the proposed demolition site. Whereas on September 19th, 2021, a comment letter not opposing to the demolition was received by the City Clerk's office. Whereas the analysis of the Urban Planning Department demonstrates that the demolition application meets the criteria of the bylaw 1317 concerning demolition. Whereas the preliminary replacement program has already been approved by resolution number 2019-08-173 for the Site Planning and Architectural Integration Program, SPAIP, attached to the construction permit application. Whereas the approved SPAIP already provided for the complete demolition of the exterior siding. Whereas the removal of the siding constituted a demolition of less than 50% of the total walls and roof, as defined in bylaw 1317 concerning demolition. Whereas a project involving the demolition of less than 50% of the overall walls and roof is not required to go through the demolition process in accordance to bylaw 1317 concerning demolition. Whereas the present demolition application was required due to the removal of the terracotta blocks behind the facing brick and the Ciparex aerated concrete panels comprising of roof slab, resulting in the 50% demolition threshold of the entire walls and roof being exceeded. Whereas the removal was required due to the poor condition of these components, as noted at the worksite and described in Silverio Marzin's engineer report dated August 5th of 2021. Whereas the demolition of the exterior envelope was done without a permit, and a notice of violation was issued on June 18th of 2021 by the City of Westmount's Urban Planning Department. Whereas the present demolition application differs from the approved SPAIP only by the removal of the above described items, which have no impact on the exterior appearance of the replacement project. Whereas the Planning Advisory Committee, PAC, recorded an unfavorable recommendation in the minutes of its September 28th, 2021 meeting. Whereas this recommendation is based namely on the criteria of bylaw 1305 on site planning and architectural integration programs, rather than the criteria of the bylaw 1317 concerning demolition. Whereas this recommendation is also based on the architectural value of the category 2 building, but that value is based primarily on the qualities of the exterior envelope, which was favorably recommended for replacement by the PAC at its meeting on June 18th of 2019. Whereas council acknowledges the recommendation of the PAC, but considers that it does not need to revise its decision made under resolution number 2019-08-173, given the public interest, the nature of the demolition work being done without a permit, and the ability of the applicant to accurately carry out the work authorized under that resolution. Whereas the decision of the council would be subject to change if the illegal demolition work were to result in the council's approval of a new SPAIP and rescission of resolution number 2019-08-173, whereas council will never tolerate illegal demolition work in the city and offenders must be sanctioned. Whereas it is proposed by council that fines related to illegal demolition work will be substantially increased as a result of the powers recently granted to Quebec municipalities under the Act respecting land use, planning and development, CQLR, CA 19.1. I move that the above preamble be part of this resolution, that the preliminary plan for the reuse of the cleared land, that the permit application for the demolition of the building located at 4898 de Maisonneuve Boulevard West be approved in accordance with the analysis and information provided in the application number 2021-01058, dated July 5th, 2021, and this under the following conditions. That a monetary guarantee in the amount of $444,635 be provided prior to the issuance of the demolition permit for the reuse of cleared land requiring the demolition of the building located at 4898 de Maisonneuve Boulevard West. The guarantee may, at the request of the applicant, be released upon substantial completion of the work. 2, that the construction work be started within 12 months of the issuance of the demolition permit. 3, that the subdivision and building permits be issued prior to or simultaneously with the issuance of the demolition permit.
Thank you, Councillor Peart, for that, and a seconder on that. I see Councillor Lulham's hand as a seconder. I think Councillor Peart, you have some additional comments on this.
Yeah, I think I share the concern and frustration of many of us on council. Many of you have heard me voice my opinions on this project before. I've said before that this was foreseen by all except maybe the applicant and the professionals who continuously attested that demolition below the 50% threshold was possible. And I just remind everybody that this threshold is important because anything greater than that necessitates a demolition hearing, a hearing like we are present for today, a public hearing. I've previously given my personal opinions on the mediocre architectural quality of this replacement program, but it does now, as it did before, nominally satisfy our site planning and architectural integration guidelines. Now, as a member of PAC, I also endorse the unfavorable recommendation to authorize the demolition. However, as a member of council, I need to wear a different hat and to zoom out so that I consider the additional elements beyond just the architectural integration. So, in the nature of in the public interest, we can see additional issues that need to be considered. We have a building which is just the shell of itself. We have future residents who are anxious to move into this project. We have a site that needs to resume. A resident earlier commented on the need for more apartments and more townhouses. I support that fully. We need different housing options across the territory, that's for sure. In the few spots that we do have available in our almost fully occupied territory. But it's not, to me, it's not acceptable to ask for forgiveness instead of for permission. But we can't go back in time. We need to move forward. And it's important, again, to recognize that the end product here will be the very same as was authorized by council in 2019. So that point is critical, because it's going to be the same project as we had originally envisioned. But I'd like to just back up a little bit too, because we are here today with a situation that I believe was mostly avoidable. We have a developer who proceeded with the beginning of demolition works, who carried out demolition works to the extent that it was almost at least 80% complete before our urban planning department issued a stop work order. This work was started without having even picked up a building permit, without having paid for that building permit. This should not go unnoted. These are important. This is work that started without a permit, work that the permit was not paid for. So we are where we are. We have a skeleton of the building. We can't go back in time. We need to proceed, but it's kind of awakened us a little bit in the sense that we know that our demolition bylaws need to be reviewed and perhaps bolstered. We know that our enforcement policy needs to be reviewed. And we also know that our fines need to be reviewed. And I think that was alluded to in our whereases, because now we have additional powers that were accorded to us by the province, and our fines for such behavior will be adjusted. The timeline here is important. The date was, I believe, June 14th, when the inspector first visited the site to issue that stop work order. It wasn't until the following day with which we received a report from the engineers stating that this was necessary. So a resident had asked earlier about a counter expertise. Well, it's hard to do a counter expertise after after the demolition works have already been effectuated. So it was effectively a done deal by the time we were notified. It was effectively a done deal by the time this information, the validation for the necessity of this demolition was provided to us. I hope that we don't have to go through something like this again, because as I've said before, and as I said in 2019, many of us anticipated this outcome. So that's all I have to say, Mayor Smith.
Thank you. I think you captured a lot of the concerns that council had, and the position that we're in of having a demolition hearing after the demolition has actually taken place. So does anyone else on council have any other comments on this before we vote? No? Okay. And I would note that this is the last vote of this mandate. So all in favor, so a seconder on this was Councillor Lulham, and all in favor? Carried. So the demolition is granted. And now I see there was a hand up of Mr. Schnitzer. I don't see his hand up anymore. Perhaps it's down now since the vote has gone in favor. So I will give it 1 second. There is a second question period. If anyone has any questions, now is the time to ask it. S'il y a d'autres questions, ça c'est le moment. No? Okay. Pas d'autres questions. Thank you, everyone. This is the last public meeting of, oh, I have a question. That is, no, I don't actually have a question. Sorry, I put my hand up by accident. This is the last public meeting of this council. So I would like to thank you all for attending. And I wish you well. And the new council will be sitting come mid-November. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.